I was sitting alone in a small cafe in Barcelona when my phone started buzzing like an emergency alarm. My sister was sobbing on the other end, telling me the police were there because someone claimed she was trespassing. I did not scream. I did not explain. I simply smiled and delivered the one sentence that silenced my entire family. The house they thought they had just taken had not belonged to me for 2 weeks. My name is Lexi Warren, and I am 34 years old. I have spent the last decade building a reputation for being the person who fixes things that are broken, usually corporate structures or failing logistic chains. Currently, that reputation had landed me in a sun-drenched plaza in Barcelona, managing a high-stakes merger for Lumen Ridge Labs. It was 2 in the afternoon on a Tuesday. The air smelled of roasted coffee beans and salty sea breeze, and I was enjoying the kind of solitude that usually costs a fortune to obtain. My laptop was open, displaying a spreadsheet that projected fourth-quarter earnings, but my mind was pleasantly blank. Then my phone vibrated against the marble tabletop. It was a violent, jarring buzz that rattled the spoon against my saucer. I glanced at the screen. The name flashing there was Brielle. My younger sister did not call me to ask how I was doing. She did not call to congratulate me on the new contract. Brielle called when she needed money, or when she had crashed a car, or when a boyfriend had dumped her and she needed someone to validate her victimhood. I considered letting it go to voicemail. The Spanish sun was too warm and the coffee too perfect to interrupt with drama from 4,000 miles away. But the phone kept buzzing, insistent and angry. I slid my finger across the screen and brought the phone to my ear. "Lexi!" The scream pierced my eardrum before I could even say hello. It was not a greeting. It was the high-pitched, hyperventilating wail of a child who has dropped their ice cream cone. Except Brielle was 29 years old. "Breathe, Brielle," I said, my voice steady. I took a sip of my cortado. "What is wrong?" "The police are here," she sobbed. The sound was distorted, likely because she was pressing the phone too close to her mouth. "They are threatening to arrest me. Lexi, you have to tell them. You have to tell them right now." I set my cup down. The ceramic made a sharp click against the table. "Slow down. Who is threatening to arrest you? Where are you?" "I am at the house. Your house." She was gasping for air between words. "I was just unpacking my boxes in the master bedroom, and then this man barged in and started screaming. And now there are 2 officers standing in the hallway, and they are saying I am trespassing. Tell them, Lexi, tell them it is my house now." My hand hovered over the keyboard of my laptop. I did not type. I just let the words hang there in the heavy, humid air of Barcelona. "Unpacking?" I asked. My voice remained dangerously level. "Why are you unpacking in my house, Brielle?" "Because Mom and Dad said I could." She sounded indignant now, the fear giving way to that familiar spoiled entitlement that had defined our entire childhood. I told them about the eviction at my apartment complex, which was completely not my fault. By the way, the landlord is a total psycho, and Mom said I could just have your place since you are in Europe for 6 months. She gave me the key. "Lexi, Dad drove the U-Haul over this morning." I closed my eyes for a brief second. The image was crystal clear in my mind. My parents, Gordon and Marianne Warren, playing the benevolent saviors with assets that did not belong to them. They would have made a production out of it. I could imagine my father unlocking the front door with that spare emergency key I had foolishly entrusted to them 3 years ago for catastrophic situations. Fires, floods, broken pipes, not for housing their adult daughter who refused to hold down a job. "They gave you the key," I repeated. "Yes, so tell this cop to back off." In the background, I heard a deep, masculine voice shouting. It was not a police officer. It was someone else, someone furious. "I do not care who she has on the phone," the man was yelling. "I closed on this place 14 days ago. I have the deed in my hand. Get her out of here before I press charges for breaking and entering." I smiled. It was a small, cold thing that didn't reach my eyes. "Brielle," I said, "put me on speaker." "What? No, just tell them." "Put me on speaker. Brielle, now." There was a fumbling sound, the scratch of plastic against skin, and then the audio quality shifted. I could hear the echo of the high ceilings. I knew those acoustics well. I had spent $50,000 renovating that foyer, stripping the linoleum to reveal the original hardwood, choosing the exact shade of gray for the walls that would catch the morning light. I knew exactly where she was standing. She was likely near the foot of the stairs, right by the niche where I used to keep a vase of dried lavender. "Okay," Brielle sniffled. "You are on speaker." "Hello?" I said, projecting my voice clearly. "My name is Lexi Warren. To whom am I speaking?" "Officer Miller, Charleston Police Department," a gruff voice answered. "Ma'am, we have a situation here. This individual claims she has permission to reside on the premises, but the homeowner is disputing that claim." "I see," I said. "Is the homeowner there?" the man shouting. "I am right here," the angry voice boomed. This would be Mr. David Arnott. I had never met him in person. My lawyer had handled the closing, but I knew his file. He was a young architect, recently married, looking for a starter home to fix up. He was precisely the kind of person who would not take kindly to finding a stranger unpacking generic clothing in his new master bedroom. "Mr. Arnaud," I said, my tone professional, as if I were addressing a board meeting rather than a domestic crisis. "I apologize for the disturbance. I am the previous owner of the property at 42 Oak Creek Lane." "Previous?" Brielle's voice squeaked. "Lexi, what are you talking about?" I ignored her. "Mr. Arnaud, if you check your email, the one you used for the closing documents with the title company, you will see I have just forwarded you a digital copy of the signed deed and the transfer of possession that was finalized 2 weeks ago. I have also attached a time-stamped affidavit stating that I surrendered all legitimate keys to the realty firm upon closing." I tapped the send button on my laptop. I had drafted the email 5 minutes ago. The moment Brielle mentioned the police, I had been waiting for this. Not specifically for this moment, perhaps, but I had been waiting for the inevitable overstep. I knew my family. I knew that leaving a house empty in their vicinity was like leaving fresh meat in front of wolves. I just hadn't expected them to be stupid enough to do it after the property had legally changed hands. "You sold it?" Brielle screamed. The sheer betrayal in her voice was almost impressive. "You sold the house? But Mom promised me." "Mr. Arnaud," I continued, cutting through my sister's hysteria. "The woman currently in your hallway is Brielle Warren. She has entered your property without your permission and without my knowledge. The key she used was a spare I left with my parents for emergencies involving fire or flood. It was not authorization for tenancy. You have every right to remove her." The line went dead silent. I could hear Brielle gasping, the air sucking into her lungs in sharp, shocked rhythms. "Lexi!" she shrieked, the sound tearing through the speaker. "You cannot do this. Dad is going to kill you. We moved all my stuff in. The truck is gone. Where am I supposed to go?" "That sounds like a question for Gordon and Marianne," I said. "They are the ones who gave you a key to a house that does not belong to them, or me." "Officer," Mr. Arnaud's voice came back, lower now, seething with a mix of relief and renewed anger. "You heard her. She sold the place. This woman is trespassing. I want her out, now." "Ma'am," the police officer said, presumably addressing Brielle, "you need to grab your personal effects and vacate the premises immediately. If you refuse, we will have to place you under arrest." "But I have nowhere to go," Brielle wailed. "Lexi, help me. Tell them to stop." I looked out at the bustling street of Barcelona. A couple was walking by, holding hands, laughing at something on a shop window. The world was turning, the sun was shining, and 4,000 miles away, the anchor that had dragged me down for 34 years was finally being cut loose. "I cannot help you, Brielle," I said. "I do not own that house. I am just a voice on a phone in Spain. You should probably call Dad. Tell him his housewarming gift just got you evicted." "I hate you," she screamed. "I hate you, I hate you, I tapped the red icon on my screen. The call ended. Silence returned to my little table in the plaza. I set the phone down, face down, on the cool marble. My heart was beating slightly faster than normal. a rhythmic thud against my ribs. But my hands were steady. I picked up my cortado. It was still warm. I took a long, slow sip, tasting the bitterness of the espresso and the sweetness of the steamed milk. I did not feel guilty. I waited for the guilt to come. That familiar, crushing weight that had been trained into me since I was 6 years old. The obligation to fix, to save, to absorb the pain for everyone else. But it did not come. Instead, I felt a strange, terrifying clarity. I opened my email client again. I saw the notification that Mr. Arnaud had opened the documents. I also saw a new email drafting in my mind, one I would need to send to my lawyer, but that could wait. My phone buzzed again, then a third time. It danced across the table, vibrating with the collective rage of the Warren family. I knew what was happening. Brielle had called our mother had called our father, and now, they were all turning their cannons toward me. I watched the phone buzz one more time. It was a call from Dad. I did not answer. I simply turned the phone off, sliding the power button until the screen went black. The house was gone. The asset they felt entitled to was no longer mine to give. I had sold it 14 days ago, quietly, efficiently, to a lovely couple who had no idea they were walking into the middle of a war zone. I had signed the papers digitally, transferred the funds to an offshore account that my parents did not know existed, and boarded a plane to Europe. They thought I was just on a business trip. They thought the house was sitting there, empty and waiting for them to exploit, just like I had always been. They were wrong. I signaled the waiter for the check. I had a lot of work to do for Lumen Ridge Labs, and I intended to enjoy my evening in Barcelona. The war had started, yes, but for the first time in my life, I wasn't the one trapped in the trenches. I was the general on the hill, and I had just ordered the first volley. To understand why I felt no guilt sitting in that Spanish cafe while my sister hyperventilated in a stranger's hallway, you have to understand the architecture of the Warren family. Some families are built on love. Some are built on tradition. Mine was built on a very specific, unspoken supply chain where I was the manufacturing plant and everyone else was the consumer. Gordon and Marianne Warren did not raise 2 daughters. They raised 1 daughter and 1 insurance policy. I was the policy. The dynamic was established before I could even tie my own shoes. I was the older sister, the sensible one, the stoic one. Brielle was the baby, the fragile spirit, the one who needed protection from the harsh edges of reality. If Brielle broke a vase, it was an accident caused by her exuberant nature. If I broke a vase, it was a sign of carelessness that required a lecture on the value of hard-earned money. I remember being 16 years old. It was a humid Tuesday in July. I had been working at a local diner for 6 months, saving every single tip in a shoebox under my bed because I wanted to buy a used Honda Civic. I needed a car to get to my dual enrollment classes at the community college because Gordon and Marianne had made it clear that while they supported my ambition, they would not support the logistics of it. They were too busy driving Brielle to dance competitions, cheerleading camps, and modeling auditions that never went anywhere. That Tuesday, I came home to find my room ransacked. The shoebox was gone. I found my mother in the kitchen, calmly chopping vegetables. When I asked where my money was, $840, a fortune to a teenager in the late 90s, she didn't even look up. She told me that Brielle had been selected for an elite cheer squad that required a non-refundable deposit for the uniform and travel expenses. They were a little short on cash that week, so they had borrowed my savings. She used the word borrowed. When I argued, when I cried, when I pointed out that I had scrubbed grease off tables for hundreds of hours to earn that money, my father walked in. Gordon Warren was a man who believed that emotion was a weakness, at least when it came to me. He looked at me with cold disappointment and told me to stop being selfish. He said that a family helps each other. He said that Brielle had a real shot at something special, and I was holding her back over petty cash. He promised they would pay me back. They never did. That was the lesson. My needs were negotiable. Brielle's whims were emergencies. As we grew into adulthood, the gap widened. I went to a state university on a full academic scholarship because I knew there was no college fund for me. I worked 3 jobs while studying engineering and business management. I graduated with honors and zero debt. Brielle, on the other hand, bounced between 3 different private liberal arts colleges, changing her major every semester, from fashion design to interior decorating to interpretative dance. Gordon and Marianne paid for all of it, dipping into their retirement savings, refinancing their mortgage, all while telling me how proud they were of Brielle for finding herself. When I landed my first 6-figure job at 24, the dynamic shifted from passive neglect to active predation. I became the family bank. It was never a direct demand. It was always framed as a crisis that only I could solve. If I didn't step in, the family would collapse. There was the time Brielle got a DUI at 22. My parents called me at 3 in the morning. Hysterical. They didn't have the liquidity for a good lawyer. If she had a record, her life would be ruined. I paid the retainer, $5,000. I was told I was saving her future. There was the time Brielle decided she was going to be an entrepreneur and started a custom candle business. She maxed out 3 credit cards, buying inventory she never sold. When the debt collectors started calling the house, my mother called me, weeping. She said the stress was giving my father heart palpitations. She asked if I wanted to be responsible for Gordon having a heart attack. I paid off the cards. $12,000. I was told I was keeping the family healthy. Every time I wrote a check, I bought a little bit of silence. I bought a week where my phone didn't ring with someone screaming. I thought I was being a good daughter. I thought that if I proved I was reliable enough, eventually they would respect me. I thought that if I solved enough problems, they would finally look at me and see a person, not a utility. I was wrong. The turning point, though I didn't act on it immediately, happened 2 years ago at Thanksgiving. I had just been promoted to regional director. I was exhausted, burned out, and struggling with severe insomnia. I flew home hoping for a few days of rest. Dinner was a disaster. Brielle announced she was pregnant. She wasn't married. The father was a bartender she had known for 3 weeks, and she had no job. Gordon and Marianne were ecstatic. They cried tears of joy. They toasted to the new grandbaby. Then, before the turkey was even carved, my father turned to me. He didn't ask how my job was. He didn't ask why I looked so tired. He looked me in the eye and said that with a baby coming, Brielle would need a stable place to live. Her apartment was too small. He suggested that since I was making so much money and traveling all the time, I should buy a duplex. I could live in one side and let Brielle live in the other. Rent-free, of course, because she would be a single mother. It wasn't a request. It was an expectation. I felt something snap inside my chest. It wasn't anger. It was something colder. It was the realization that I was not a human being to them. I was a resource. I was a draft horse they expected to pull the cart until I died in the harness. I told them no. The explosion was immediate. Marianne told me I was cold-hearted. Gordon told me I had lost my way and forgotten where I came from. Brielle cried and said I was jealous of her happiness because I was a workaholic spinster who would die alone. I left that night. I drove back to the city in silence. That was when I decided to buy the house in Charleston. I bought it solely in my name. I didn't buy a duplex. I bought a single-family townhome in a historic district, far more expensive than what I needed, but beautiful. It was my sanctuary. It was the physical manifestation of my hard work. I decorated it with things I loved. I created a space where no one asked me for money, where no one expected me to fix anything. But even then, the indoctrination ran deep. When my parents came to see it, they didn't congratulate me. They walked through the rooms, assessing the square footage like prospectors surveying a gold mine. Marianne commented that the guest room was perfect for when Brielle needed a break from the baby. Gordon noted that the garage had plenty of storage space for Brielle's unsold inventory. They looked at my sanctuary and saw another resource for their golden child. I gave them the spare key a month later. Not because I wanted to, but because the guilt was still there. A hook embedded in my jaw that they could tug whenever they wanted. They told me they needed it in case of emergencies. I lied to myself and believed them. I didn't realize until 2 weeks ago that to the Warren family, Brielle's inconvenience was the emergency. So, sitting in Barcelona, staring at the phone that I had finally silenced. I wasn't just refusing to help my sister avoid an arrest. I was refusing to be the draft horse. I was refusing to be the wallet. I was refusing to be the frantic, desperate daughter trying to buy love that was never for sale. The house in Charleston had become a symbol. As long as I owned it, they saw it as theirs. As long as I had space, they felt entitled to fill it. As long as I had success, they felt entitled to harvest it. Selling the house wasn't just a real estate transaction, it was an amputation. I had to cut off the limb to save the body. I took another sip of my coffee. It was cold now, but I drank it anyway. For 34 years, I had been the designated driver of the clown car that was my family. I had steered them away from cliffs, paid their tolls, and kept the engine running. Now, I had stepped out of the car, and for the first time in history, they were going to have to learn how to drive. The townhouse on Oak Creek Lane was supposed to be my exhale. After 34 years of holding my breath, waiting for the next crisis to drop, I wanted a place where the air belonged only to me. I bought it in early October, just as the humidity in Charleston was breaking, and for the first time in my life, I signed a document that had no other names attached to it. There was no cosigner, no beneficiary, no dependent lurking in the fine print. It was a 3-story structure built in the 1800s, with wrought iron balconies and creaky heart pine floors that cost a fortune to refinish. I spent 6 months renovating it. I did not hire a project manager because I wanted to feel the weight of every decision. I wanted to choose the exact shade of navy blue for the library walls. I wanted to select the marble for the kitchen island. Running my hands over the cold stone slabs until I found the one with the perfect vein of gold running through the white. I installed a soaking tub in the master bath that was deep enough to drown out the noise of the world. Every fixture, every light switch, every throw pillow was a declaration of independence. I was building a fortress. When the renovations were finally complete, the house felt like a physical extension of my own body. It was clean. It was orderly. It was quiet. It was the antithesis of the chaotic, emotionally cluttered environment I had grown up in. I remember sitting on the floor of the empty living room the night before the furniture arrived, drinking a glass of wine and listening to the silence. It was the most expensive sound I had ever heard, and I savored every second of it. Then my parents came to visit. I had delayed their invitation for 3 months. I told them the contractors were still working. I told them I was traveling for business. The truth was that I was terrified to let them in. I knew, with a sinking dread in my gut, that they would bring their atmosphere with them, like a fog that seeps under the door frames. But eventually, the excuses ran dry, and I invited them for a weekend in March. They arrived 40 minutes late, which was standard for the Warrens, and they did not bring a housewarming gift. I did not expect one, but the lack of gesture set the tone immediately. My mother, Marianne, walked through the front door, and her eyes did not light up with pride for her daughter's success. Instead, her gaze darted around the foyer like a laser scanner, calculating square footage and assessing market value. "It is very large," she said. That was her first sentence. Not hello, not congratulations, just an observation of volume. "It is 3,000 square feet," I said, trying to keep the defensiveness out of my voice. I closed the heavy oak door behind them, shutting out the street noise. I wanted space to host clients and work from home comfortably. Gordon, my father, walked past me without taking off his shoes. He headed straight for the structural elements, tapping on the walls and inspecting the crown molding. He looked like a prospective buyer at an open house, not a father visiting his daughter's home. "You got a good rate on the mortgage?" he asked, staring at the ceiling medallion I had paid an artisan 2 weeks to restore. "I put 40% down," I said. "The rate is fine." "Smart," he grunted. "Real estate is the only safe place to put money these days. Better than the market. This is a good asset to have in the family portfolio." The phrase made my skin crawl. The family portfolio. There was no family portfolio. There was my money, and then there was their lack of it. But I said nothing. I led them into the kitchen. where I had prepared a charcuterie board with expensive cheeses and prosciutto. Marianne ignored the food and walked to the French doors that opened out onto the courtyard garden. "It is a lot of house for just one person. Lexi," she said, her back to me. Her tone was casual, but I knew the code, in Marianne's language. Too much for one person meant available for someone else. "I like the space," I said, pouring wine. "I like not feeling crowded." "It must be lonely," she continued, turning around to face me. She took a sip of the wine I had handed her. "All these empty rooms, it feels a bit cold, doesn't it? Like a museum." "It feels like peace to me," I countered. Gordon wandered into the kitchen then. Having completed his inspection of the ground floor, he leaned against the marble island, my beautiful, hand-selected marble, and looked at me with a speculative gleam in his eye. "You know," he said, "Brielle is having a hard time with her landlord again. They are raising the rent on that shoebox she lives in. It is criminal what they charge for apartments these days." I took a long drink of my wine. "That is unfortunate," I said. "Perhaps she should look for a roommate to share the cost." Gordon chuckled, a dry, dismissive sound. "She has a baby, Lexi. She cannot just live with strangers. She needs stability, family." He looked around the kitchen, his eyes sweeping over the high-end appliances and the custom cabinetry. "This place has, 4 bedrooms?" "3, I lied. It had 4. I had turned one into a home office. "Still," he said, "that downstairs suite with the separate bathroom? That is perfect for someone who needs a little independence but still needs support. It has its own entrance off the side yard, right?" My hand tightened around the stem of my wine glass. I had designed that suite for visiting executives or friends from college. I had furnished it with a queen-sized bed and crisp white linens. I had never, not once, envisioned my sister and her chaotic life occupying that space. "That is the guest suite, Dad," I said firmly. "For guests, short-term guests." Of course," Gordon said, holding up his hands in mock surrender. "I am just saying, it is a waste to let good real estate sit empty when family is struggling. That is all. We are a team, right?" The rest of the weekend proceeded in the same fashion. Every compliment was a backhanded critique of my selfishness. The garden is beautiful, but who has time to weed it when they work 80 hours a week? The dining room table seats 12, which is funny because you never cook. By the time they left on Sunday afternoon, I felt like my house had been burglarized. They hadn't taken anything physical, but they had stolen the sense of ownership. They had walked through my sanctuary and planted flags of entitlement in every corner. I spent the next day scrubbing the house. I washed the sheets they had slept on twice. I wiped down every surface they had touched, but the feeling remained. I felt watched. I felt like the house was no longer mine. It was just a holding tank for resources that they were waiting to requisition. That was when the paranoia set in. I called a locksmith on Monday morning. I had him install high-security deadbolts on every exterior door. I spent $4,000 on a smart security system with cameras covering the front porch, the back courtyard, and the side alley. I set up motion sensors that would alert my phone if a window was opened. I wanted to create a digital perimeter that would alert me the second the Warren entitlement tried to breach my walls. But then came the conversation about the key. A month after their visit, I was scheduled to go to Tokyo for 3 weeks. Marianne called me, her voice dripping with maternal concern. "You are going to be away for so long," she said. "What if there is a storm? What if a pipe bursts like it did at your Aunt Sarah's house? You cannot just leave a property like that unmonitored. Lexi, it is irresponsible." I knew she was manipulating me. I knew it, but the logic was sound enough to bypass my defenses. I had invested over $800,000 in the house. The thought of coming home to a flooded living room because I was too stubborn to have a local contact was terrifying. "I have a security system, Mom," I said. "A security system cannot shut off the water main," she countered. "Just give us a key. Lexi, for emergencies. We will put it in the safe. We won't even look at it unless the house is burning down. Don't be so paranoid. We are your parents." We are your parents, the ultimate trump card. I gave in. I mailed them a single key. It was a copy of the front door key, tagged with a red piece of plastic that said, "Emergency only." "Thank you, honey," Marianne said when she received it. "You will sleep better knowing someone is looking out for you." I did not sleep better. In fact, every time my phone buzzed while I was in Tokyo, my heart jumped, fearing it was a notification that the alarm had been disarmed. But nothing happened. The key stayed in their safe, or so I thought. Over the next 2 years, the house remained my physical space, but mentally, it was contested territory. Every time I spoke to them, they asked about the house. "How is the roof? Did you fix that draft in the hallway? Is the guest room still empty?" They were keeping tabs on the asset's condition. I eventually realized that the "too big" comment wasn't an observation. It was a verdict. They had decided that my ownership was temporary. They were just waiting for me to get tired, or married, or transferred, so they could slide Brielle into the vacuum. They viewed my hard work as a placeholder for her inheritance. When the assignment in Barcelona came up, I knew exactly what would happen. I would be gone for 6 months. The house would be empty. The pressure to let Brielle house-sit would be insurmountable. They would wear me down with guilt trips and midnight calls about her desperate situation, and once she was in, she would never leave. The guest suite would become her apartment. The library would become a playroom for her child. My sanctuary would be colonized. I looked at the cameras on my phone one night before I made the decision to sell. I saw the empty, pristine hallway of my house in Charleston. It was beautiful, and it was already lost. I realized then that as long as I owned the keys, I would never truly own the house. The only way to reclaim my peace was to burn the deed. The key I had given them, the one meant for fires and floods, was the weapon they would eventually use against me. I just never guessed they would use it to break into a house I no longer owned. I touched the screen of my phone, turning off the camera feed. The decision to sell wasn't made out of financial necessity. It was an act of exorcism. I was casting out the ghosts before they could fully possess the machine, but I made one critical error. I underestimated their audacity. I assumed they would ask permission before using the key. I assumed there were still some boundaries they wouldn't cross without checking with me first. I was wrong. The key wasn't in the safe. It was in Brielle's pocket, burning a hole through the fabric of my life, ready to unlock a door that led straight to hell. The notification that changed the trajectory of my life arrived on a rainy Tuesday evening in November. It was not a dramatic courier delivering a sealed envelope, but a simple ping on my laptop while I was reviewing supply chain logistics in my home office. The subject line read, "Offer of employment. Director of European Operations. Lumen Ridge Labs." I sat back in my ergonomic chair and stared at the screen. The rain was hammering against the window pane, a rhythmic drumming that usually soothed me, but in that moment, the sound faded into the background. I opened the email. The offer was staggering. Lumen Ridge Labs was not just offering me a job. They were offering me an escape route. The position was based in Barcelona. The contract was for a minimum of 2 years. The salary was 40% higher than what I was currently making, and the relocation package included a housing stipend that would allow me to live like royalty on the Mediterranean coast. For exactly 30 seconds, I felt a rush of pure, unadulterated joy. I imagined myself walking down Las Ramblas, drinking wine in a plaza at midnight, and working on projects that actually challenged my intellect. I imagined a life where my phone did not ring with emergencies that were not really emergencies. Then, the joy evaporated, replaced by a cold, heavy stone in the pit of my stomach. I looked up from the screen and gazed around my office. I looked at the built-in bookshelves I had designed. I looked at the hallway leading to the guest room my father was so obsessed with. If I took this job, I would be gone for 2 years. My house, my sanctuary, would sit empty in Charleston. And my family would know. I could script the conversation in my head with 100% accuracy. I would tell Gordon and Marianne about the promotion. They would feign happiness for about 3 minutes. Then, Marianne would say, "Well, this is actually perfect timing. Lexi, since you will not be using the house, Brielle can move in to watch it for you. It is dangerous to leave a property vacant for so long. She can keep the pipes from freezing and bring in the mail. It helps you, and it helps her. Win-win. They would not ask. They would assume. And if I said no? If I told them I would rather hire a property management company or leave it empty? Then I would be the villain. I would be the selfish, ungrateful daughter who was abandoning her family to run off to Europe while her sister struggled to put a roof over her head. They would weaponize my success against me. They would say that since I was making so much money, I had a moral obligation to share my excess resources. They would wear me down with guilt, late-night calls, and passive-aggressive comments until I finally handed over the code to the alarm system. I stood up and walked to the window. My reflection stared back at me against the dark glass. I looked tired. I looked like a woman who had spent 34 years playing a game she was rigged to lose. I realized then that the house was no longer an asset. It was a hostage. As long as I owned 42 Oak Creek Lane, I was vulnerable. The house was a physical tether that they could pull whenever they wanted something from me. Even if I was 4,000 miles away in Spain, the house would be here, a tangible object of desire for my sister and a leverage point for my parents. They had the emergency key. They knew the layout. They felt entitled to the space. If I left it standing, they would find a way in. A radical thought formed in my mind. It was quiet, simple, and absolutely terrifying. What if I didn't have the house? I turned back to my computer. I read the offer letter again. Start date, January 15th. That gave me roughly 8 weeks. If I sold the house, I would be free, not just physically, but existentially. If I sold the house, there would be no guest room to demand. There would be no empty garage for storage. There would be no family asset to debate over. The conversation would end before it even began. But I knew I could not tell them. If I announced I was selling, the sabotage would begin immediately. Gordon would tell me it was a bad time to sell, that the market was unstable. Marianne would cry and say I was stripping away the family's safety net. Brielle would beg me to let her rent it, at a discount that equaled 0, promising she would buy it from me someday when she got on her feet. They would guilt me, stall me, and create chaotic emergencies to distract me until the window of opportunity closed. I had to do something I had never done before. I had to operate in the shadows. I sat down at my desk and opened a new browser window. I typed in the name of a real estate agent I knew from college, a woman named Sarah, who was known for her discretion and her ability to move high-end properties quickly. I began to type an email. Subject: confidential listing, urgent. My fingers hovered over the keys. This was the point of no return. Sending this email was a declaration of war. Even if the other side didn't know the battle had started yet, it was an admission that I could not trust my own parents with the truth of my life. It was an admission that the only way to be safe from them was to own nothing they could want. I felt a wave of grief wash over me. I loved this house. I loved the way the morning light hit the kitchen tiles. I loved the smell of the old wood floors. I had built this place to be my forever home, my retreat from the world. But a retreat is useless if the enemy has the key to the front gate. I typed the message. I explained that I was relocating internationally and needed to sell the property off-market if possible, or with minimal signage. I emphasized that privacy was paramount. I told her I wanted a quick close, preferably to a cash buyer or someone pre-approved who wanted a turnkey property. I pressed send. The moment the email vanished from my outbox, the room felt different. The air felt thinner, sharper. I walked out of my office and into the hallway. I ran my hand along the wall. I was saying goodbye. I was evicting myself so that I wouldn't have to evict my sister later. It was a strategic retreat, a scorched earth policy applied to my own life. For the next few days, I lived a double life. I went to work. I answered my mother's texts about the upcoming holidays with vague pleasantries. I listened to my father complain about the cost of car insurance. And all the while, I was secretly dismantling my existence in Charleston. I accepted the job at Lumen Ridge Labs 3 days later. I signed the contract digitally and sent it back. I told no one. When Sarah, the agent, came to see the house, I parked my car 2 streets away so my parents wouldn't spot her vehicle in my driveway if they happened to drive by. We spoke in hushed tones in the kitchen. She told me the market was hot. She told me she had a list of buyers looking for exactly this kind of historic renovation. She asked why I was being so secretive. "I have a difficult family situation," I said. It was the understatement of the century. Sarah nodded. She didn't pry. She just took photos with her phone, avoiding the windows, and promised to screen the buyers carefully. I spent my nights packing. I couldn't use a moving company yet, so I packed one box at a time and stored them in the back of the deep closet under the stairs. I sorted through years of memories, deciding what to keep and what to leave. I felt like a spy in my own home. One evening, my mother called while I was wrapping my grandmother's china in bubble wrap. "What are you doing, Lexi?" she asked. "You sound out of breath." I froze. "Just cleaning out the pantry," I lied. "Throwing away expired cans." "Oh, good," she said. "You know, Brielle was saying she needs some new kitchen stuff. If you're getting rid of anything decent, put it in a box for her. Don't just throw it out." "I will keep that in mind," I said. My hand shook as I hung up the phone. Put it in a box for her. Even my trash was considered their property. That call solidified my resolve. I wasn't just selling a building. I was buying my freedom. The price of that freedom was the house I loved. But for the first time, I was willing to pay it. I was done being the provider. I was done being the safety net. I was about to become something they had never encountered before. A person with boundaries that could not be crossed, because the bridge had been burned down. I continued to pack. I contacted a lawyer to handle the closing via power of attorney so I wouldn't have to be present at the table. I set up the offshore bank transfer. I orchestrated every detail with the precision of a military operation. The decision was made. The house was as good as gone. And the most dangerous part was about to begin. The 2 weeks between the sale and the explosion, when I would hand over the keys to a stranger and walk away, leaving my family holding a map to a treasure chest that was already empty. I went to sleep that night on a mattress that I would soon sell, in a room that would soon belong to someone else, and I slept better than I had in years. I was finally putting Lexi Warren first. The sale happened with the speed and silence of a shifting tide. Sarah, my broker, was a miracle worker who understood the assignment perfectly. She did not list the property on the public multiple listing services where nosy neighbors or bored relatives could stumble upon it. Instead, she utilized her private network of vetted buyers, the kind of people who were pre-approved for jumbo loans and looking for turnkey properties in the historic district. We had an offer within 48 hours. The buyers were a couple named David and Elena Arnault. I met them only once, during the final inspection, and the interaction was brief but poignant. They were young, perhaps 28 or 29, and they had that specific, glowing optimism that comes from starting a life together before the world has had a chance to chip away at it. Elena walked through the living room, running her hand along the fireplace mantel I had restored, and I saw a look of pure reverence on her face. She did not see a storage unit or a financial asset. She saw a home. David was pragmatic, but clearly smitten with the architecture. He asked about the HVAC system and the roof warranty, questions I answered with the detailed precision of someone who had poured her soul into the maintenance of the structure. I felt a strange sense of relief handing the house over to them. It felt less like a transaction and more like an adoption. I was entrusting my sanctuary to people who would actually respect it. But while the sale was proceeding smoothly in the background, I had to manage the foreground, my family. I knew I could not just disappear without an explanation for the empty house. Silence creates a vacuum, and the Warrens abhorred a vacuum. They would fill it with speculation and, eventually, intrusion. I needed a cover story that was ironclad, one that used their own respect for corporate bureaucracy against them. I called them on a Sunday evening, 10 days before my flight to Barcelona. "I have some news," I told my mother. "The company is transferring me to Spain immediately. The project timeline has been moved up." "Spain?" Marianne gasped. "But what about Christmas? What about the house?" I was ready for this. I had rehearsed the lines until they sounded bored and administrative. I will not be home for Christmas, I said. As for the house, that is taken care of. Lumen Ridge Labs has a strict policy for expatriate employees. They have signed a contract with a corporate housing management firm to oversee the property while I'm gone. It is part of my compensation package. A management firm? Gordon's voice piped up from the background. What does that mean? They are renting it out? No, I lied smoothly. It means the company takes legal possession of the property management to ensure it is maintained to executive standards. They handle the insurance, the security, and the upkeep. But because of the liability clauses in the contract, the house must remain strictly vacant. No guests, no family, no access. It is a sterile asset for the duration of my assignment. There was a pause on the line. I held my breath. This was the gamble. I was banking on my father's belief that corporate contracts were unbreakable forces of nature. Well, Gordon said, sounding disappointed but accepting. That sounds standard. Companies these days are terrified of lawsuits. They probably do not want anyone slipping on the sidewalk and suing them. Exactly, I said. So the alarm codes are being changed, and the locks are being rekeyed by their security team tomorrow. Even I will not have access after Tuesday. It was a brilliant lie because it removed my agency. I wasn't the one saying no to Brielle living there. The faceless, litigious corporation was saying no. I wasn't the bad guy. I was just an employee following orders. That is a shame, Marianne sighed. Brielle was hoping to maybe stay there for a few weeks while she looks for a new place. Her landlord is being so unreasonable. I know, Mom, I said, injecting a fake note of sympathy into my voice. But my hands are tied. It is in the contract. If anyone enters the property, I lose the relocation bonus and could face disciplinary action. We understand, Gordon said. Business is business. We will figure something else out for Brielle. I hung up the phone and let out a breath that felt like it had been trapped in my lungs for a decade. They bought it. They actually bought it. The next week was a blur of finalized logistics. I signed the closing documents on a Friday morning at a title company downtown. I sat across from David and Elena, signing my name on line after line, transferring the deed, the warranty, and the title. When the final signature was inked, the title officer smiled and pushed a heavy envelope toward me. Congratulations, Ms. Warren, she said. The funds have been wired to your designated account. I checked my banking app. The numbers were there, the equity I had built, the initial down payment, the appreciation. It was all liquid now. It was no longer a roof or a floor. It was freedom capital. I handed over the keys. I gave David the 2 main sets, the garage opener, and the code to the smart lock system. I have reset the master code to the factory default. I told him. You should change it immediately. We will, David promised. We are moving in on Monday. We have a few painters coming in over the weekend to do the nursery. Nursery? I asked. Elena blushed. We are expecting in June. I smiled, and this time it was genuine. The house has good bones, I said. It will be a safe place for a child. I walked out of that office lighter than air. I drove to the airport, returned my rental car, and boarded a flight to Barcelona with 2 suitcases and a carry-on. As the plane taxied down the runway, I watched the Charleston skyline retreat into the distance. I felt a profound sense of closure. I had won. I had extracted myself from the parasitic dynamic of my family without a screaming match, without a guilt trip, and without leaving a trail. I arrived in Barcelona and threw myself into my new life. The city was vibrant, loud, and gloriously indifferent to my existence. I rented a small, chic apartment in the Gothic Quarter. I started my work at Lumen Ridge Labs. I drank sangria. I learned how to order dinner in Catalan. For 14 days, I lived in a state of blissful ignorance. I believed that because I had sold the house legally, the connection was severed. I believed that because I had told my parents a logical story about corporate management, they would respect the boundary. I assumed that even the Warrens, with their boundless entitlement, would not dare to trespass on a property that was supposedly under strict corporate surveillance. I was naive. I had made one critical miscalculation. I had assumed my parents operated in the same reality as the rest of the world, a reality where laws matter, where ownership is respected, and where no means no. But I forgot that in the Warren family, reality was whatever Gordon and Marianne wanted it to be. They didn't believe the house was under corporate management, or perhaps they just didn't care. To them, the corporate contract was just another obstacle to be maneuvered around, another rule that applied to other people but not to them. And I had forgotten the most dangerous loose end of all: the emergency key. I had handed over every key in my possession to David Arnault, but I had not asked my parents to return the spare key I gave them 3 years ago. I hadn't asked because I didn't want to raise suspicion. I thought that if I asked for it back, they would know I was up to something. I thought the lie about the locks being rekeyed by the management company would be enough to deter them from trying to use it. I underestimated their desperation, and I underestimated my sister's ability to believe that the world owed her a living room. While I was sipping espresso and reviewing quarterly projections, my parents were back in Charleston, likely staring at my empty house and thinking, what a waste. They weren't thinking about my job or my contract. They were thinking about Brielle's eviction notice. So, when my phone started buzzing on that sunny afternoon in Barcelona, shattering my peace, I wasn't just receiving a call. I was receiving a lesson in the physics of my family. You cannot simply walk away from a black hole. It will try to pull you back in, even if it has to break the laws of the universe or the laws of property rights to do it. I looked at the phone, saw Brielle's name, and for a split second, I thought about ignoring it. But then the buzzing stopped and started again instantly. It was the rhythm of panic. I picked up the phone, and as I listened to my sister scream about the police, I realized that my clean break had just become a dirty, jagged fracture. The house was gone, but the ghost of my ownership was still haunting the hallway, and my family had just walked right into it. The speakerphone on Brielle's device was high quality. I had bought it for her 2 Christmases ago, so she could take hands-free calls while driving, an attempt to prevent the very accidents she was so prone to causing. Now, that technology was transmitting the high-definition audio of her humiliation directly to my table in Barcelona. "Okay, you are on speaker," Brielle said, her voice trembling with a mixture of fear and smug expectation. She truly believed that I was going to fix this. She believed that I would tell the officer that this was all a misunderstanding, that I was merely away on business, and that my beloved sister had full authorization to turn my living room into her personal storage locker. "State your name for the record," the officer's voice boomed. He sounded tired. He sounded like a man who had dealt with too many domestic disputes on a Tuesday afternoon. "This is Lexi Warren," I said, my voice projecting clearly into the echoing foyer of 42 Oak Creek Lane. "I am the former owner of the property." "Former?" Brielle let out a sharp, incredulous laugh. "Lexi, stop playing games. Tell them to get out. Tell them Mom and Dad gave me the key." "I am not playing a game, Brielle," I said, "and I do not care who gave you a key. It was not theirs to give." I could hear the shuffling of feet. I imagined the tableau. Brielle standing by the stairs, clutching her purse, the 2 police officers standing with their hands on their belts, and David Arnault, face flushed, holding the deed he had likely pulled from his safe. "Mr. Arnault," I said, addressing the stranger in the room, "I sent the documents to your email. Have you received them?" "I am looking at them right now." David's voice was tight, vibrating with suppressed rage. "Officer, look at this. This is the closing statement, dated 14 days ago, signed by Lexi Warren and notarized. And here's the transfer of keys affidavit." She swore she handed over all copies. There was a pause. The silence that followed was heavy, the kind of silence that sucks the air out of a room. I could hear the rustle of paper, or perhaps a phone screen being turned, as the officer inspected the proof. "That is impossible," Brielle whispered. The smugness was leaking out of her voice, replaced by the dawn of a horrific realization. Mom said the company was managing it. She said Lexi was just renting it out to the corporation." "Mom lied to you." "Brielle," I said. I didn't raise my voice. I didn't need to. The truth was doing all the heavy lifting for me. Or perhaps she lied to herself, but the reality is that I sold the house. I sold it to Mr. and Mrs. Arnott. I have no legal claim to that property, and neither do you. But my stuff, Brielle stammered. The truck is gone. I paid the movers in cash. They left 10 minutes ago. All my boxes are in the bedroom. Then you have a logistical problem, I said. Officer, David cut in, his patience evidently snapping. You see the date? You see the signature? This woman has no lease. She has no title. She broke into my home. My wife is upstairs crying because she came home to find a stranger unpacking in our master suite. I want her out. Immediately. Ma'am, the officer said, his tone shifting from investigative to authoritative. It appears the homeowner is correct. You have no legal standing to be here. But I have nowhere to go. Brielle's voice cracked, rising into a shriek. Lexi, you cannot do this. You knew I was moving in. I did not know, I corrected her, because if I had known, I would have told you that you were about to commit a felony. I told Mom and Dad that the house was under strict corporate management and that no one could enter. They chose to ignore that. They chose to give you a key I gave them for emergencies, fires and floods, Brielle, not free rent, and they sent you there to squat. I am not a squatter, she screamed. I am your sister. Right now, according to the law in South Carolina, you are an intruder, I said. The sound of weeping filled the line. It was the weaponized weeping I had heard 1,000 times before. It was the sound she used to get out of speeding tickets, to get Mom to pay her credit card bills, to get Dad to fight her battles. But there was no one in that foyer who was susceptible to it. David Arnott didn't care about her tears. He cared about the sanctity of his home. The police officer didn't care about her family drama. He cared about the law. And I was 4,000 miles away, drinking cold coffee, finally immune to the frequency. Ma'am, you need to gather your personal items and step outside, the officer said. We can discuss whether Mr. Arnott wants to press charges for breaking and entering outside, but you cannot stay in this house. Press charges? Brielle gasped. Lexi, stop them! Tell them not to arrest me. I cannot tell them anything. Brielle, I said calmly, it is not my house. It is Mr. Arnott's house. If he wants to press charges, that is his right. You invaded his privacy. Please, Brielle begged, turning her attention to David. I could hear the shift in her direction. She was pivoting, trying to find a new savior since the old one had malfunctioned. Please, I didn't know. My parents. They gave me the key. They told me it was okay. I am just a victim here. David let out a scoff that sounded like a bark. You unlocked my front door. You walked past my family photos on the wall. You started hanging your clothes in my closet. You didn't think to check? You didn't think it was weird that someone else's furniture was here? I thought Lexi left it, she wailed. Mr. Arnott? I interrupted. If I may. What? David snapped. He was still furious with me, and rightfully so, for the existence of the rogue key, but he was listening. My sister is not detail-oriented, I said, choosing my words carefully. She is operating on information given to her by our parents, who are the ones who actually deceived her. While she is trespassing, she likely did not have criminal intent. She is simply entitled and uninformed. If you allow her to call a moving van to remove her things within the hour, it might save you the headache of a court appearance. I wasn't doing it to save Brielle. I was doing it to save David. He didn't deserve to be dragged into the Warren family circus any further than he already was. She has 1 hour, David said, his voice hard as granite. If everything isn't off my property in 60 minutes, I am having it hauled to the dump, and if she is not off the property in 5 minutes, she goes in the back of the cruiser. You heard him, Brielle, I said. Start packing. I can't, she sobbed. I can't move it all by myself. The movers are gone. Then you better start carrying boxes to the curb, I said. Call Dad. He is the one who set this up. Let him come and sweat. I hate you, she hissed at the phone. I hate you so much. You ruined everything. I sold a house, I said. You and Mom and Dad ruined everything else. There was a scuffle, the sound of the phone being grabbed. Ms. Warren? It was the officer again. We have the situation under control. We are escorting her out now. Do you have any further business with the homeowners? No, Assam officer, I said. Please apologize to Mr. and Mrs. Arnott for me. I will be in touch with them via email regarding the security breach. Understood. And officer? Yes? Make sure she leaves the key. Will do. The line went dead. I sat there for a long time, staring at the black screen of my phone. The adrenaline was fading, leaving behind a strange, hollow exhaustion. I had done it. I had finally detonated the bomb. I could picture the scene in Charleston vividly. Brielle, humiliated and weeping on the sidewalk, surrounded by boxes of her designer clothes and half-burned candles, the neighbors peering out from behind their curtains, witnessing the downfall of the Warren princess, David Arnott slamming the heavy oak door and locking it, really locking it this time. And then, the second wave began. My phone lit up. Incoming video call. Dad. I watched the name flash, then it stopped. Incoming video call. Mom. It stopped. Incoming message from Brielle. You are dead to me. Incoming message from Dad. Answer the phone, Alexis. Incoming message from Mom. How could you do this to your sister? She is on the street. The notifications stacked up like incoming missiles. They were scrambling. They were panicking. For the first time in their lives, the narrative had spun out of their control. They couldn't gaslight the deed. They couldn't manipulate the police. They couldn't bully the new owner. They were faced with a hard, cold legal reality that no amount of emotional blackmail could soften. I picked up my coffee cup, but my hand was shaking slightly, not from fear, but from the sheer magnitude of the severance. I had cut the cord. I decided I would not answer them tonight. I would let them stew in the juices of their own making. I would let Gordon drive his luxury sedan over to Oak Creek Lane and load boxes into the trunk while his neighbors watched. I would let Marianne try to explain to Brielle why she had sent her into a stranger's house. I would let them turn on each other, which they inevitably would when they didn't have me to blame. I opened my laptop and composed a short email to my lawyer. Subject: Harassment and trespassing incident. James, please be advised that my family attempted to occupy the Oak Creek property today. The new owners, the Arnotts, were involved. Police were called. Please prepare a cease and desist letter for Gordon, Marianne, and Brielle Warren regarding any further contact with me or my former assets. I want everything on paper from this point forward. I hit send. Then, I stood up, gathered my things, and walked out of the cafe. The sun was setting over Barcelona, casting long, golden shadows across the cobblestones. I was alone in a foreign country. I had no family to call, no home to return to in the States. I had never felt more at home in my life. I waited 3 hours before I answered the phone. I went back to my apartment in the Gothic Quarter, took a shower, and changed into a fresh set of lounge clothes. I wanted to be clean. I wanted to be calm. I wanted to be visually perfect when I finally faced the firing squad. I set my laptop on the dining table, poured a glass of water, and waited for the inevitable notification. It came at 11 at night, Barcelona time. Incoming video call. Dad. I accepted the call. The screen filled instantly with the interior of my parents' living room in Charleston. The lighting was harsh, casting long, angry shadows against the beige walls. Gordon was sitting in his leather recliner, his face a mottled shade of crimson that suggested his blood pressure was dangerously high. Marianne was pacing behind him, wringing her hands, her makeup smeared, and somewhere in the background, curled up on the sofa like a tragic heap of laundry, was Brielle. You, Gordon snarled, the moment my face appeared on the screen. He did not say hello. He did not ask if I was safe. He pointed a shaking finger at the camera lens. You vicious, spiteful little girl. Hello, Dad, I said. My voice was even, stripping away any emotion he could latch onto. Hello, Mom. Don't you dare sit there and look at us like that, Marianne screamed, rushing toward the camera, her face distorted as she got too close to the lens. Do you have any idea what you have done? Do you have any idea the humiliation you caused us today? I believe the police report will state that Brielle caused the disturbance, I said. Or perhaps you did, when you sent her to break into a house that did not belong to you. It was your house, Gordon roared. He slammed his hand down on the armrest of his chair. It was family property. You do not sell family property without consulting the head of the family. I am the head of my own household, Gordon, I said, dropping the dad title intentionally. I bought the house with my money. I paid the mortgage with my money. I paid for the renovations with my money. And I sold it 2 weeks ago to reclaim my money. You are not a shareholder in my life. You are bystanders. We are your parents, Marianne wailed. We raised you. We sacrificed for you. And this is how you repay us? By setting a trap for your sister? By letting her be dragged out by the police like a common criminal? She was not dragged out, I corrected. She was asked to leave because she was trespassing, and it was not a trap. Mom, it was a sale. A trap implies I wanted you to go there. I did everything in my power to keep you away. I told you it was under corporate management. I told you the locks were changed. I told you it was a sterile environment. You chose to ignore every single warning because you thought the rules did not apply to you. You thought you could bully a corporation just like you bully me. I did not raise a liar, Gordon shouted. You lied to us. You said Lumen Ridge Labs was managing it. I lied to protect my peace, I said, and you proved exactly why I had to do it. If I had told you I was selling, you would have sabotaged the sale. You would have guilted me. You would have moved Brielle in before the sign was even in the yard. I had to lie, Gordon, because you are incapable of respecting the truth if it inconveniences you. The Arnauts are calling everyone, Marianne interrupted, her voice trembling with panic. David Arnaut knows people. Lexi, he knows people at the club. He knows Gordon's business partners. He's telling everyone that we gave our daughter a key to burgle his home. Do you know what that does to your father's reputation? He is in the middle of a merger. This could ruin him. Then perhaps he should not have kept a key to a house he did not own, I said. That sounds like a failure of risk management on his part. Fix it, Gordon commanded. His voice dropped to a low, menacing growl. Excuse me? I said fix it, Gordon repeated. You are going to call David Arnaut right now. You are going to tell him there was a misunderstanding. You are going to tell him that you gave Brielle permission verbally, but you forgot to send the email. You are going to take the blame. Lexi, you are going to tell him you are scatterbrained and overworked and you made a mistake. You will clear Brielle's name, and you will clear mine. I stared at him. For a moment, I was genuinely marveled by the audacity. Even now, facing the wreckage of their own entitlement, their only strategy was to use me as the shield. They wanted me to perjure myself, to look like an incompetent fool to my professional peers, just to save them from the consequences of their greed. No, I said. The silence that followed was absolute. What did you say? Gordon whispered. I said no, I repeated. I will not lie for you. I will not take the blame for you. I will not look like an idiot to save your ego. You gave Brielle the key. You told her to move in. You took the risk. You own the fallout. If you do not do this, Marianne hissed, do not bother coming home for Christmas. Do not bother coming home ever. I was not planning on it, I said. Suddenly, a movement in the background caught my eye. Brielle sat up. Her face was puffy, her mascara running down her cheeks in black rivulets. She looked from Gordon to Marianne, and then at the screen. You knew? Brielle asked. Her voice was hoarse. Knew what? Gordon snapped at her. Shut up, Brielle. You knew Lexi said it was corporate management? Brielle stood up, her voice rising. You told me she said it was okay. You told me she gave permission, but she just said she told you it was a sterile asset. We were handling it, Marianne yelled at her. We knew Lexi would be difficult, so we made an executive decision. You lied to me, Brielle screamed. She turned on them. her finger jabbing into Gordon's chest. "I was the one with the cops in my face. I was the one who almost got arrested. You told me it was safe. You sent me in there like a distinct crash test dummy because you were too cheap to pay for my apartment." "Watch your tone," Gordon bellowed. "No," Brielle shouted back. "Lexi is right. You guys are crazy. I was humiliated today. David Arnott looked at me like I was trash. And it is your fault." I watched them turn on each other. It was like watching a pack of wolves that had run out of prey and begun to eat their own tails. "This is your sister's fault," Marianne shrieked, pointing at the screen. "If she wasn't so selfish, none of this would have happened." "I am done," I said. My voice cut through their bickering like a razor. They all stopped and looked at the screen. "I am done being the villain in your story," I said, "and I am done being the bank." "What does that mean?" Gordon asked, his eyes narrowing. "It means the gravy train has derailed," I said. "I just logged into my banking portal. I have canceled the automatic transfer for your car insurance. Brielle, I have canceled the supplementary card on my American Express account that Mom uses for groceries that always seem to come from Nordstrom. I have stopped the payments on the cell phone plan that covers all three of you." "You cannot do that," Brielle gasped. "My phone! How will I look for a job?" "Use the library," I said. "It is free." "Lexi, be reasonable," Marianne said, her tone shifting instantly from anger to bargaining. "Your father's business is in a delicate place right now. We need that liquidity, just for a few months, until the merger goes through." "Gordon is a grown man," I said. "If his business cannot support his lifestyle, perhaps he should downsize, maybe sell the house. Oh wait, you cannot sell your house, can you? It is leveraged to the hilt. I saw the mail on the counter last time I was there. Dad, second mortgage notices." Gordon went pale. "You went through my mail?" "It was on the counter," I said. "I have eyes. I know you are drowning, and for 10 years, I have been the life raft. But today, you tried to sink me to save yourselves, so I am cutting the rope." "I will sue you," Gordon sputtered. It was a weak, pathetic threat. "I will sue you for emotional distress, for abandonment." "Good luck finding a lawyer who will take that case," I said. "I have the deed. Gordon, I have the emails, I have the police report, and I have a very expensive legal team provided by Lumen Ridge Labs who would love to countersue for harassment." I leaned closer to the camera. "Here is the new reality," I said. "I am not your daughter anymore. I am not your sister anymore. I am a stranger who lives in Europe. Do not call me. Do not email me. Do not show up at my apartment. If you try to contact me again to ask for money or to demand I lie for you, I will file a restraining order so fast your head will spin. And since I am currently a resident of Spain, I will make it an international matter." "Lexi, please," Marianne sobbed, realizing finally that the bridge wasn't just burning, it was already ash. "We are family. We love you." "No, Mom," I said softly. "You love what I can do for you. There is a difference, and I finally love myself enough to know it." "You will die alone," Brielle screamed, reverting to her favorite insult. "You will be a lonely, bitter old woman with only money to keep you warm." "I would rather be warm with money than cold with you people," I said. I moved my cursor over the red button. "Goodbye," I said. "Lexi, wait! Don't you dare!" Gordon started to shout. I clicked the button. The screen went black. The shouting cut off instantly. The silence rushed back into my apartment, cool and absolute. I sat there for a minute, staring at my own reflection in the dark monitor. My heart was pounding, a hard, fast rhythm against my ribs, but my hands were steady. I felt a strange sensation in my chest. It wasn't sadness, it wasn't regret. It was lightness. For 34 years, I had been carrying a backpack filled with stones. Stones labeled duty, guilt, obligation, family. I had marched up a mountain with that weight, thinking that if I just climbed high enough, they would let me take it off. But they never did. They just kept adding more stones. Tonight, I had unbuckled the straps. I had let the backpack fall off the cliff. I stood up and walked to the window. The lights of Barcelona twinkled below me, a sprawling grid of golden ambition and history. Somewhere down there, people were eating tapas, falling in love, arguing about politics, living their lives. And now, for the first time, I was one of them. I was free. But as I looked out at the city, a thought occurred to me. Gordon was desperate. I had seen it in his eyes when I mentioned the second mortgage. A desperate man does not just go away because he lost an argument. He escalates. I had cut off the money, and I had humiliated him. He would not take that lying down. He would try to strike back, not at me directly, but at the only thing I had left that he could touch, my reputation. I turned back to my laptop. I had won the battle, but the war wasn't over. I needed to prepare for the aftershocks. I opened my email and began to draft a message to the head of HR at Lumen Ridge Labs. I needed to get ahead of the narrative before Gordon tried to poison the well. I was done being reactive. From this moment on, I was on the offensive. The silence that followed my digital excommunication of the Warren family lasted exactly 72 hours, for 3 days. My phone was blissfully quiet. There were no screaming voicemails, no guilt-laden texts, no notifications from the bank regarding unauthorized attempted charges. I began to think that perhaps I had overestimated their resilience. I thought that maybe, just maybe, the shock of the police intervention and the freezing of their assets had actually forced them into a state of reflection. I was wrong. They were not reflecting. They were suffocating. I found out why on a Friday morning while sitting in my new glass-walled office at Lumen Ridge Labs. I was reviewing a competitor analysis report when a news alert popped up on my secondary monitor. It was a headline from a niche industry publication that covered logistics and supply chain mergers in the southeastern United States. Vance Holdings suspends acquisition talks with Warren Logistics, cited over character concerns. I stared at the screen. Warren Logistics was my father's company. It was a mid-sized firm that had been bleeding money for 5 years, kept alive only by creative accounting and, until recently, my personal injections of cash. The acquisition by Vance Holdings was his Hail Mary. It was the golden parachute that was supposed to pay off his debts, clear the second mortgage on his house, and fund his retirement. Gordon had been bragging about this deal for 6 months. He had told anyone who would listen that Silas Vance, the billionaire tycoon behind Vance Holdings, was a personal friend who believed in his vision. I clicked on the article. The text was vague, citing unforeseen revelations during the due diligence phase regarding leadership stability and judgment. It was corporate speak, for we realized the guy in charge is a liability. I frowned. Due diligence usually involved auditing books or checking legal compliance. It rarely cited character concerns, so publicly unless something catastrophic had happened. I wondered what Gordon had done. Had he cooked the books? Had he insulted Silas Vance at a golf game? Then, my eyes drifted to a photograph in a completely unrelated tab I had open, a social media profile of the new owners of my house, David and Elena Arnaud. I had looked them up simply to confirm they had settled in. It was a picture of them at their wedding 2 years ago. I looked at the caption, Elena Vance Arnaud and David Arnaud exchange vows in Charleston. My blood ran cold, and then hot, and then cold again. Elena Vance. I quickly opened a new search window. I typed in Silas Vance children. The result was immediate. Silas Vance had one daughter, Elena Vance, a philanthropist and art historian, married to architect David Arnaud. I sat back in my chair, covering my mouth with my hand to stifle a gasp that was half shock and half hysterical laughter. The universe, it seemed, had a sense of humor that was both poetic and brutal. My parents had not just broken into a stranger's house. They had broken into the home of the daughter of the only man on earth who could save them from financial ruin. I pieced the timeline together instantly. The break-in happened on Tuesday. The police report would have been filed that afternoon. David and Elena would have called Silas Vance, the protective father and billionaire, to vent about the insane family who felt entitled to invade their property. David would have mentioned the name Warren, Brielle Warren, Gordon Warren. Silas Vance would have realized that the man he was about to give $5 million to was the same man whose wife and daughter had just traumatized his pregnant child. The dominoes had not just fallen, they had been smashed with a sledgehammer. My phone rang. It was Gordon. I hesitated. I had threatened a restraining order. I had sworn I would not answer. But curiosity is a powerful drug. I wanted to hear it. I wanted to hear the sound of a man who realizes he has set fire to his own life raft while he is still at sea. I answered the video call but kept my camera off. Lexi? His voice was unrecognizable. The arrogance was gone. The anger was gone. It was replaced by a thin, reedy tremor of pure terror. You have 3 minutes, Gordon, I said, and if you scream, I hang up. I am not screaming, he whispered. Lexi, you have to help us. Please, it is the end. Everything is ending. I saw the news, I said. Vance Holdings pulled the term sheet. He called me this morning, Gordon said. He sounded like he was weeping, though I could not see him. Silas called me personally. He said his son-in-law called him on Tuesday. He said a crazy woman named Brielle Warren had barricaded herself in his daughter's new house. He asked me if I knew her. And what did you say? I asked. I tried to deny it, Gordon admitted, and the pathetic nature of the lie made me cringe. I told him it was a estranged relative, a distant cousin, but he knew. Lexi, he had done the background check. He knew Brielle was my daughter. He knew the house was yours. He said if I cannot manage my own family, and if I do not respect the sanctity of private property, he cannot trust me with his capital. He canceled the deal. He pulled the offer. That sounds like a logical business decision, I said. Logical? Gordon's voice cracked. It is ruin. Do you understand? Without that buyout, the bank takes the company next month. The payroll account is empty. I cannot pay the staff. The second mortgage on the house. If the company folds, they call the loan. We will lose the house. Lexi, we will be on the street. Your mother is having a panic attack. Brielle is catatonic. Actions have consequences, I said. I believe that is a phrase you used to say to me when I got a B on a report card. Lexi, listen to me, Gordon pleaded. There is a way out. Silas said. He said he might reconsider if David Arnott drops the complaint. If David calls him and says it was all a big misunderstanding, if David says we are actually on good terms. I saw where this was going, and it was repulsive. You want me to call David, I said. You sold him the house, Gordon said, clutching at the straw. You have a relationship with him. You can call him. You can tell him. Tell him Brielle is mentally unstable. Tell him we are getting her help. Tell him we are sorry. Tell him anything. Just get him to call Silas and give the green light. You are the only one who can fix this. You are the only one they will listen to. Let me get this straight, I said, my voice dangerously calm. You want me to call the man whose house you invaded, the man whose pregnant wife you terrified, and ask him to do a favor for the people who abused his privacy? You want me to use my professional credibility to clean up your mess so you can get $5 million? It is not for the money, Gordon lied. It is for the family. If we lose the house, where will we go? Where will Brielle live? Maybe she can get a job, I suggested. Lexi, please. He was sobbing now, ugly, wet sounds of a man who had never been told no in his life. I am begging you. I am your father. Doesn't that mean anything? It means everything, I said. It means I learned from the best. You taught me that business is business. Gordon, you taught me that assets must be protected. You taught me that sentimentality is a weakness. You did, I interrupted. Every time you took my money to pay for Brielle's mistakes, every time you told me to work harder while she did nothing, you taught me that I was a tool to be used. Well, the tool is broken, Dad, and I am not fixing this. You would let us lose everything? He whispered. You would let us be homeless? I am not letting you do anything, I said. You did this. You gave Brielle the key. You sent her there. You ignored my warnings. You created the risk profile that scared away your investor. This is not my doing. This is gravity. You walked off a cliff, and now you are mad that you are falling." "If you do not make this call," Gordon said, his voice hardening slightly, trying to find one last lever of manipulation, "I will tell everyone that you orchestrated this. I will tell Silas that you set us up to sabotage the deal." I laughed. It was a dark, genuine laugh. "Gordon," I said, "Silas Vance is a billionaire because he is smart. He has already seen the police report. He knows I wasn't even in the country. He knows I sent the deed 2 weeks ago. If you try to blame me, you will just look more unstable. Go ahead. Dig the hole deeper. It will just make the foreclosure happen faster." "You are evil," he spat. "No," I said. "I am just absent, and for the first time, you are finding out how expensive my absence really is." "Lexi." "Goodbye, Gordon. Good luck with the bank." I ended the call. I sat in the silence of my office. My heart was not racing this time. My hands were not shaking. I felt a profound sense of equilibrium. The twist was perfect. It was almost Shakespearean. They had been brought down not by my revenge, but by their own greed. If they had just respected my boundary, if they had just listened when I said the house was off limits, Brielle would still be in her apartment, Gordon would still have his deal, and they would still be living their comfortable, parasitic lives. But they couldn't do it. They couldn't resist taking what wasn't theirs. And in reaching for my house, they had knocked over their own castle. I swiveled my chair around to look out at the Barcelona skyline. I realized then that the power dynamic had permanently shifted. For decades, they held the power because I craved their approval. Then, for a brief window, I held the power because I controlled the money. But now I held the ultimate power: indifference. I didn't care if Gordon lost his company. I didn't care if they lost the house. I didn't care if Brielle had to work at a fast food restaurant. Their suffering was no longer my emergency. It was just data. It was just a news headline on a secondary monitor. I turned back to my work. I had a logistics chain to optimize for Lumen Ridge Labs. I had a life to build. And as for the Warrens, they were about to learn a very hard lesson about the real estate market. You cannot live in a house you have already sold, and you cannot spend money you haven't earned. The collapse had begun, and all I had to do was sit back and watch the dust settle. The bombardment began at 6 a.m. on Saturday. I had silenced my phone, but when I woke up and glanced at the screen, the notification center was a solid wall of red. 37 missed calls, 14 voicemails, 62 text messages. They were coming from my parents, from Brielle, and even from numbers I did not recognize. Presumably borrowed phones or burner accounts they had set up in a desperate attempt to breach my defenses. I made a pot of coffee, black and strong, and sat down at my kitchen island to sift through the wreckage. I did not listen to the voicemails. I knew what they would sound like. The audio equivalent of a drowning man clawing at the person trying to save him. Instead, I read the transcripts that my phone automatically generated. They were a chaotic mix of begging, bargaining, and rage. "Lexi, pick up. We are going to lose the house. Your mother is having chest pains. Do you want to kill her? Just one email. That is all we need. Just write one email to Silas. Brielle is suicidal. You have to fix this." I deleted them, one by one. Swipe left, delete. Swipe left, delete. It was a rhythmic, mechanical process, like cleaning a virus off a hard drive. Then, an email arrived. It was from Gordon's personal account, marked with high priority. The subject line was simply, "The solution." Against my better judgment, I opened it. The email was not a letter. It was a script. Gordon had actually written out the exact words he wanted me to say to Silas Vance and David Arnott. He wanted me to send a formal statement claiming that I had been suffering from severe burnout and cognitive fatigue due to my move to Spain. He wanted me to claim that I had, in a moment of confusion, verbally authorized Brielle to stay in the house and then forgotten about it. He wanted me to say that the sale documents were the result of a clerical error on my part, and that the misunderstanding was entirely my fault. He wanted me to declare myself professionally incompetent to save his deal. I read the script twice. It was a masterpiece of gaslighting. If I sent this, I would be admitting to legal negligence. I would be destroying my own credibility as a director of operations. No one would hire a woman who forgot she sold a house and accidentally authorized a break-in. Gordon was asking me to immolate my career to keep his warm. My phone rang again. It was a number with a Barcelona area code. I frowned. My parents shouldn't have local numbers. I answered it, thinking it might be a delivery or a colleague. Lexi? It was Gordon. He had used an internet calling service to mask his location. He was evolving. "You are persistent," I said, leaning back in my chair. "Did you get my email?" he asked. His voice was breathless, tight with a manic energy that was far more disturbing than his earlier anger. "It is perfect, Lexi. It explains everything. It takes the heat off Brielle. It takes the heat off me. Silas will understand burnout. Everyone is talking about mental health these days. It makes you look sympathetic. It makes me look like a liability." "Gordon," I said, "you want me to tell a billionaire investor and my own industry peers that I cannot keep track of my own assets? You want me to say I am mentally unfit to manage a property sale?" "Who cares what they think?" Gordon snapped. "You are in Spain. You have your job. This won't affect you over there, but it saves us here. It is a harmless lie." "It is fraud," I said, "and it is defamation of my own character." "We are talking about $5 million, he shouted. "We are talking about your childhood home. If that deal does not go through, the bank takes the keys on the 1st of the month. Your mother, she cannot handle that. Lexi, she is old. She is frail. Do you want to be the reason she dies in a rental apartment?" "Mom is 62 and plays tennis 3 times a week," I said dryly. "She is not frail. She is just accustomed to comfort." "How can you be so cold?" It was Marianne's voice now. She must have snatched the phone from him. "We gave you everything. We paid for your braces. We paid for your piano lessons. We drove you to school every day. We sacrificed our own dreams so you could have a good start. And now, when we need one tiny favor, one little email, you act like we are strangers." "I am not acting, Mom," I said. "Strangers would treat me with more respect than this. You do not want a favor. You want a scapegoat. You want me to lie to cover up the fact that you felt entitled to steal from me." "It was not stealing," Marianne shrieked. "It was sharing. Families share." "Families ask," I corrected. "Thieves take." "Brielle has nothing," Marianne cried. "She is sitting here in the living room, staring at the wall. She has no money. She has no home. She has no husband. You have everything. Lexi, you have the big job, the money, the freedom. Why can you not spare a little bit of your dignity to help her?" "Because my dignity is the only thing I have that you haven't tried to spend," I said. My computer pinged. A message from Brielle popped up on my social media. It was a long, rambling block of text. "Lexi, please, I am scared. Dad is losing his mind. He is throwing things. Mom won't stop crying. I don't know what to do. I have nowhere to go. I know I messed up. Okay? I am sorry. Just fix it. Please just fix it. I will do anything. I will pay you back when I get a job. Just get Dad his deal back so he stops screaming." I looked at the words. Just fix it. Even in her apology, the burden of action was placed on me. She didn't say, "I will call David and apologize." She didn't say, "I will tell the truth." She said, "Fix it." She wanted the magic eraser. She wanted Big Sister to come in and make the bad feelings go away. They were terrified. I could feel their fear radiating through the digital connection. But they were not afraid of losing me. They were not afraid of the damage they had done to our relationship. They were afraid of the consequences. They were afraid of the downgrade. They were mourning the loss of their status, not the loss of their daughter. "I am not sending the email, Gordon," I said, my voice hard and final. "And I am not calling David Arnott. The deal is dead. You killed it. Bury it and move on." "If you do not do this," Gordon said, his voice dropping to a low, venomous register, "I will destroy you." I raised an eyebrow, though he couldn't see it. "Excuse me?" I know people, Gordon hissed. I know people in your industry. I know journalists. If you walk away from us, I will tell them the real story. I will tell them you are a drug addict. I will tell them you stole money from the company accounts before you left. I will tell them you abandoned your sick parents and your mentally ill sister. I will paint a picture of you so ugly that no company in America will ever hire you again. You are threatening to slander me? I asked. To my face? It is not a threat, Gordon said. It is a promise. If I go down, Lexi, I am taking you with me. You are not walking away clean while we burn. We are a family. We rise together, or we fall together. There it was, the naked truth. The mask of parental love had finally slipped off completely, revealing the hostage-taker underneath. He was willing to burn my future to the ground just to warm his hands for a few more minutes. Thank you, Gordon, I said. Thank you? He sounded confused. Yes, thank you for making this easy. I was feeling a little bit of lingering guilt. Just a tiny fraction. But you just killed it. I hung up the phone. I did not scream. I did not cry. I went into crisis management mode, a state of mind I had perfected over a decade of corporate warfare. I opened a new tab and typed in the email address of James Sterling. He was a high-powered attorney based in New York, whom I had retained on a retainer basis just before I left the country. Anticipating that the sale of the house might get messy, I hadn't expected to need him for a war, but I was glad he was on the payroll. Subject: immediate cease and desist and preparation for litigation. James, please see the attached log of calls and the transcript of the threat I just received from Gordon Warren. He has threatened to defame me professionally and accuse me of embezzlement and substance abuse if I do not commit fraud to salvage his business deal. I want a cease and desist order sent to Gordon, Marianne, and Brielle Warren immediately. Any further contact must go through your office. If they mention my name to a journalist, a business partner, or a neighbor, I want you to file a defamation suit for maximum damages. Also, please prepare the evidence package we discussed. I believe we may need to release it sooner than anticipated. I hit send. The evidence package was my nuclear option. It was a digital dossier I had been compiling for 5 years. It contained bank statements showing the transfers I had made to cover Brielle's debts. It contained emails from Gordon admitting that the company was insolvent without my help. It contained the voicemail transcripts where Marianne emotionally blackmailed me. It was the receipts, all of them. Gordon thought he could control the narrative because he was the loud, charismatic businessman, and I was the quiet daughter. He thought he could spin a story about a crazy, ungrateful child, but he forgot that I was an operations director. I lived in a world of documentation. I didn't just have a story, I had proof. My phone buzzed again, a text from Gordon. You have 24 hours to fix this, or I start making calls. I looked at the text. It was pathetic. He was trying to negotiate with a terrorist, not realizing that he was the one wearing the suicide vest. He thought the threat of scandal would bring me to my knees. He didn't understand that I had already walked through the fire. I was not afraid of the truth. The truth was the only thing I had left. I picked up my coffee cup. It was cold again. I walked to the sink and poured it out. I needed to go to the office. I had a meeting with the European logistics team at 2 o'clock. I had a life to live. But before I left, I did one last thing. I went to the settings on my phone and changed my number. I sent the new number to exactly 3 people: my boss, my assistant, and James, my lawyer. The Warren family line was officially disconnected. I put on my coat and walked out into the cool Barcelona air. The sky was a brilliant, cloudless blue. I felt a sense of anticipation building in my chest. Gordon wanted a war. He wanted to drag me into the mud. He was about to discover that while he was playing checkers with threats and lies, I had been playing 3-dimensional chess with facts and laws. He had 24 hours to make his move, and when he did, when he tried to execute his threat, I would be ready. I wouldn't just defend myself. I would dismantle the entire illusion of the Warren family respectability, brick by brick. They wanted to destroy my reputation? Fine. But they were going to find out that the truth is a double-edged sword, and I was holding the handle. Gordon did not wait 24 hours. He struck at dawn on Monday, fueled by a cocktail of panic and narcissism. It started with a long, rambling post on his professional networking profile, titled, "The Heartbreak of Success." In it, he painted a tragic portrait of a family betrayed by a daughter who had lost her way in Europe, succumbing to foreign influences and turning her back on the people who raised her. He hinted at mental instability. He vaguely referenced financial irregularities that he had covered up for me. It was a masterclass in projection, designed to garner sympathy from his peers and perhaps guilt Silas Vance into reconsidering the deal. He even managed to get a local gossip columnist to run a blind item about a tech executive in Spain who had left her elderly parents destitute while living a life of luxury. It was a bold move. It was also a fatal one. I did not respond on social media. I did not call the columnist. I simply forwarded the link to James Sterling with a 2-word instruction: release it. The evidence package went live at noon. It was not a public blast. That would have been tacky. It was a targeted release. James sent a certified cease and desist letter to Gordon, Marianne, and Brielle, which was standard procedure, but attached to that letter, and copied to the legal counsel of Vance Holdings, the editor of the Business Journal, and the board of directors of Warren Logistics, was a digital file containing the truth. It had everything: the timestamps of the deed transfer proving I had sold the house 2 weeks prior to the incident, the sworn affidavit from the police officer stating that Brielle had entered with a key given to her by Gordon. Contrary to his claims of a misunderstanding, the emails where Gordon admitted his company was insolvent and begged for my money. And the centerpiece? The audio recording of his threat to slander me. The effect was instantaneous. It was like watching a demolition crew bring down a condemned building. The implosion was vertical, rapid, and total. By 2 p.m, Silas Vance had issued a brief, icy statement through his publicist. He stated that Vance Holdings had zero tolerance for unethical conduct and blackmail, and that all negotiations with Warren Logistics were permanently terminated. He added a personal note wishing the Arnott family peace in their new home, effectively siding with the victims of the break-in and, by extension, me. By 4 p.m, the bank that held the note on Gordon's business loans called the note due. There would be no restructuring. There would be no grace period. The collateral, my parents' home, was now in the crosshairs of foreclosure. I watched it all happen from my screen in Barcelona. It felt distant, like watching a storm on a radar map. I saw the red warning zones. I saw the projected path of destruction, but I felt no wind and saw no rain. I was safe. The silence that followed was different this time. It wasn't the silence of plotting. It was the silence of defeat. 3 weeks later, I received a final update from James. Gordon had filed for bankruptcy. The shame had driven him into hiding. He was no longer seen at the country club or the downtown steakhouse where he used to hold court. His reputation, the one thing he valued above his own children, was shredded. He was just another washed-up businessman who had tried to play God and failed. Marianne had stopped calling. Without the money to maintain her appearances, her social circle had evaporated. She was forced to confront a reality where she had no leverage, no status, and no daughter to blame. She had lost control of the narrative, and without that control, she was a ghost in her own life. But the most surprising update concerned Brielle. With no parents to bail her out and no sister to extort, Brielle had hit rock bottom. She had been forced to leave her apartment. But instead of finding another victim, she had been forced to find a job. James told me that according to local records, Brielle was working at a retail chain in the mall, stocking shelves and folding clothes. I imagined my sister, the girl who used to scream if her latte was the wrong temperature, standing on her feet for 8 hours a day, earning minimum wage. I didn't feel a surge of malicious joy. I felt a sense of rightness. For the first time in 29 years, Brielle was participating in the real world. I had not ruined her life. I had actually jump-started it. By refusing to be her safety net, I had forced her to learn how to walk. As for me, the transition was complete. I sat on the balcony of my apartment one evening, looking out over the Mediterranean Sea. The water was a deep, inky blue, reflecting the moonlight. I held a glass of wine in my hand. But this time, it wasn't a tool to numb the stress. It was a celebration. I thought about the key. For years, I had thought the problem was the physical key to the house on Oak Creek Lane. I thought that if I just controlled access to my property, I would be safe. But I realize now that the house was just a symptom. The real key was the emotional access I had granted them. It was the belief that I owed them my happiness. It was the guilt that unlocked my wallet and my heart every time they knocked. That was the key they had used to rob me of my peace for 3 decades. I had finally changed the locks on my soul. I took a sip of wine and closed my eyes. The air smelled of salt and jasmine. I had a meeting the next morning with a new client. I had a date on Friday night with a charming architect I had met at a gallery opening. I had a life that belonged entirely to me. The Warren family drama was over. The credits had rolled. And as I sat there in the quiet beauty of my new life, I realized that the best revenge wasn't destroying them. The best revenge was simply being happy without them. I placed the glass on the table and smiled at the horizon. I was Lexi Warren, and for the first time in my life, I was home. Thank you so much for listening to this story. I would love to know where you are tuning in from. So please drop a comment below, and let's get a conversation started. If you enjoyed this story, please make sure to subscribe to the Lila Revenge Stories channel, like this video, and smash that hype button so we can share these stories with even more people.